All right, so now we're going to talk about ionic compounds that include polyatomic ions. Your topic is poly. Your goal: I can name and write ionic compounds that contain polys. So polyatomic ions contain two or more different atoms. You need to underline and or highlight polyatomic ions. Ammonium ion is the only positive polyatomic ion we are covering this year. You'll notice if you look at a polyatomic list, some of them end in 8 and some of them end in ite, and that has to do with how many oxygens are there and what the charges are. Here is a polyatomic list. You'll be given one or a link to one for you to use during your test and during your worksheet, but you can always come back to this slide as well. You notice that they give you the name, they give you the compound, and they give you a charge. Remember, if there is not a number, like right here, NH4 has just a plus sign, that would be a plus 1. So how you name polyatomic ions. For one, you don't mess with poly. If it is on that polyatomic sheet, you do not mess with how the numbers there or anything like that. So they should not be separated. If it is a polynomial written out, don't mess with it. Since they come in groups, parentheses and subscripts are used since you can't mess with it. So for example, if we need 2 sulfates, you would write SO4 and then in parentheses put the 2. If you just need 1, you do not have to have parentheses. So for naming, it always goes to the metal first and then the non-metal ion name. The only metal ion is ammonium, and you would just write ammonium as the name for that. So make sure you do type out what's underlined on this slide. So how to go from the name to the compound, and then how to go from the compound to the name. So I'm going to be doing examples on the polyatomic ions and compounds and how to name them and how to go from the name to the compound. So now I'm going to go over some examples of ionic bonds that contain polys. All right, so on this poly, you will be given a poly list. Right now, I'm going to use this to show you guys how I am getting those charges for you to use. So the first thing I'm going to go through is how to name it when you're given the compound. So if we do N2SO, so let's do a different one. Sorry, N2CO3. So N2, that's just your starting compound. We know that's nitrogen, so you'll just write down nitrogen. CO3 is a poly, so you look at your poly sheet. CO3 is carbonate, so that'll just be nitrogen carbonate. You don't have to remember these names. You will be given a list. You could just use the list to figure out what the name is. So another example, if we do MgClO3 2. Alright, so we know ClO3 is the poly. For 1, it's in parentheses. It's a telltale sign. And 2, magnesium is not a part of any poly. So Mg is magnesium. So you'll just write down magnesium. You'll find ClO3 on the poly list, which in this case is chlorate. So you'll just put chlorate next to it. You write it just like how it is on that list. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about how to go from the name to the compound. So an example for that would be calcium nitrite. Okay, so calcium is just calcium, so it's Ca. We find that on our periodic table. It's right there. So that will be a +2 charge. So we just put +2. If this compound does not end in IDE, if it ends in anything else, then it's going to be on your poly sheet. So nitrite, it's ITE instead of IDE, so we know we need to look on our poly list. So nitrite, right here we have NO2, and it has a minus sign, so we know it has a -1 charge, so you'll do NO2 with a -1 charge. All right, you crisscross this just like we did with the simple binary. That 1 is going to go with calcium. That 2 is going to go with NO2. Now, since we don't mess with polys, we have to put it in parentheses. So that would be Ca, NO2, and then put the 2 that we crisscrossed outside of the parentheses. So if we do another example, beryllium peroxide. So beryllium is just the element, so we'll find beryllium. In this case, it is a +2, so Be +2. Now, I know I said if it does not end in IDE, then it is automatically a poly, but you also notice that peroxide, there is no element that starts with perox or anything like that. So if it's different than any element on the periodic table, then just look at the poly sheet and you'll probably find it. So peroxide. Actually, peroxide's not on this specific list, so I'm going to change that to sulfate. So I'm going to do another example with beryllium sulfate. Be is a +2 charge. We know that by looking at the periodic table. Be is right there, +2. Sulfates, it does not end in IDE, so we know we need to look at the poly sheet. So look for sulfate, which is right here, second from the bottom. It is SO4 with a -2 charge. So we'll put SO4 with a -2 charge. So we crisscross. That 2 goes with SO4. That 2 goes with Be. So it'll be Be2, SO4, 2. But we have 2 Be's and we have 2 SO4, so we can simplify that and just put Be, SO4. If you need more examples or need me to walk through any more ionic bonds containing polys, let me know. I'll be happy to. And if you need help with your practice pages in your digital notebook, let me know, and I could go through those with you as well. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. In your digital notebook for this section, you will need to answer these questions. You can see where I insert text boxes for you to fill in. The first part, you are actually just listing the polys. It's not a compound. You don't have to crisscross or anything. I just want you to be familiar with figuring out what name is what. There is a link for the common polys up here. Just click that and then click on the link. And then there is a link to a periodic table up here as well. So the bottom half is where you have your actual compounds. This first side, you are given the compound name, and the second side, you are given the compound and you'll need to name it. Now for this, I am fine if you work this out on a piece of paper and then put the answers on here. That's fine. Or you could just write it all out on a piece of paper and just upload a picture of it, whichever you prefer. If you need to make a subscript or make a number that's lower to talk about how many you have, you go to format, text, and that would be a subscript. So that's how you get a number smaller or in the lower section.